He was the kind of person people never looked at twice. He woke up early, went to work, came home tired, ate simple food, and slept. Nothing special, nothing traumatic. His life moved in straight lines. He didn't believe in aliens, secret signs, or hidden worlds. To him, those things belonged to movies and internet stories, not real life. He believed if something truly strange happened, someone important would talk about it on the news. Since that never happened, he assumed the world was exactly what it looked like. But a few months before everything changed, small things started to feel off. Began with dreams. Not scary dreams, not exciting ones either. Just strange. In them, he was standing somewhere wide and quiet. The sky was darker than night, but filled with soft light, like stars were breathing. He always felt calm there. Too calm. When he woke up, the calm stayed for a few minutes, then faded. He tried to forget them. Everyone dreams, he told himself. It meant nothing. Then came the lights. On his way home from work one evening, he noticed something bright in the sky. It wasn't moving like a plane. It didn't blink like a helicopter. It just hovered for a moment, then slowly faded away. He stood there longer than he meant to, staring upward, feeling slightly foolish. By the time he reached home, he had convinced himself it was probably a drone or some reflection. He didn't mention it to anyone. Still, the feeling of being watched started to follow him. Not watched in a scary way. More like being noticed. Sometimes while sitting alone, he would suddenly feel alert, like someone had entered the room, even though no one was there. His heart wouldn't race. His hands wouldn't shake. It was more confusing than frightening. He began checking locks more often, looking out windows, but everything stayed normal. He kept telling himself he was just tired. One night, after a long day, he decided to take a walk. He did this often when his thoughts felt heavy. The streets were quiet, and the air felt cooler than usual. As he walked, he noticed how silent everything was. No cars, no dogs, not even insects. The silence felt thick, almost pressing against his ears. That was when time seemed to slow down at first. He thought he was dizzy. His steps felt lighter, like the ground wasn't fully solid. The streetlights ahead looked stretched, as if the light itself was bending. He stopped walking. His breathing sounded too loud in his own ears. Then he felt it again. That calm, not coming from him, but surrounding him. He turned around, expecting to see another person on the road. Instead, he saw figures standing a short distance away. They weren't human, but they weren't monsters either. Their shapes were tall and smooth, their movements slow and controlled. They didn't rush him. They didn't reach out. They just stood there, as if waiting. He should have run. Every part of logic said he should have turned and fled. But his body didn't listen. Fear didn't arrive the way it was supposed to. Instead, curiosity filled the space where panic should have been. Among them was one figure that felt different. Even without understanding why, he knew she was important. She stood slightly forward, not demanding attention, but naturally holding it. Her presence felt heavy, not in a bad way, but in a way that made everything else feel smaller. When she looked at him, it felt personal. Not like she was studying him, but like she recognized him. That moment broke something inside him. His thoughts scrambled. His heart beat harder. His mouth went dry. He tried to speak, but no sound came out. The figures didn't move closer, yet he felt like the distance between them no longer mattered. Then, just as suddenly as it began, everything ended. The street returned to normal. Sounds rushed back all at once. His knees buckled, and he caught himself against a wall. The figures were gone. The sky was empty. The lights were ordinary again. He stood there for a long time, breathing heavily, trying to understand what had just happened. When he finally made it home, his hands shook as he unlocked the door. He sat down and replayed the moment over and over. Every detail felt sharp and real. It didn't feel like a dream. It didn't feel like imagination. Yet how could it be real? He didn't sleep that night, thought the next days were worse. He went to work, spoke to people, did his tasks, but everything felt distant. It was like he was watching his own life through glass. The calm from the dreams returned at strange times, especially when he was alone. Sometimes he felt a soft pull in his chest, like something was calling him without words. He searched online, but quickly stopped. Every story sounded exaggerated or fake. He didn't want to mix his experience with people who clearly wanted attention. He wasn't looking for fame or answers from strangers. He just wanted his normal life back. So he stayed quiet. Weeks passed, and nothing happened. No lights, no figures, no dreams. He started to relax. Then one evening, while sitting alone in his room, he felt it again. Stronger this time. Not fear. Not calm. Recognition. The air around him seemed to change, like it was waiting. He closed his eyes without knowing why. Images flashed in his mind stars. Unfamiliar skies, faces he didn't recognize, but somehow knew. His breath slowed on its own. He realized then that whatever he had encountered that night hadn't been random. He wasn't chosen by accident. That thought scared him more than the figures ever did. He didn't know what they wanted. He didn't know why him. All he knew was that something had seen him, noticed him, and stepped into his quiet life without asking permission. And deep down, a part of him knew this was only the beginning. Even though nothing visible happened after that moment, he could feel it. The straight lines of his life had started to bend. The world he trusted without question now felt larger, deeper, and far less simple. He went to bed that night, staring at the ceiling, fully awake, knowing one thing for certain. Whatever he had seen was real to him, and it was not finished with him yet. After the first encounter, life slowly returned to a kind of normal, but he couldn't shake the feeling that nothing would ever be the same. Days passed, and he tried to go about his routines, work, home, sleep, but there was a quiet tension in the back of his mind, like a low hum he couldn't turn off. He didn't tell anyone about what had happened. Even thinking about it out loud seemed impossible. Who would believe him? Who would even understand? Then it started again. At first, it was subtle. He would catch glimpses of something at the edge of his vision shapes that didn't belong, shadows that moved without reason. The air sometimes felt heavier in certain rooms, warmer or cooler in ways that didn't make sense. He would pause, hold his breath, and stare into empty spaces, waiting for a sound or movement that never came. And then the calm returned. That same strange, deep calm he had felt the first night. It was as if the world had paused just for him. One night, he decided he couldn't ignore it anymore. He stepped outside, even though it was late, even though the streets were quiet and empty. The air smelled different, like rain and something else he couldn't name. He walked slowly, scanning the sky, feeling the familiar pull in his chest that he could no longer explain. Then he saw them again. They weren't far away this time. He could make out their shapes clearly: tall, smooth, otherworldly, but not frightening. They didn't run, they didn't hide. They stood in a small clearing at the edge of a park, perfectly still. And there she was, the one who had noticed him before, the one who had held his attention without trying. When she saw him, she stepped forward, and something inside him shifted. He didn't feel fear, though his heart raced. He didn't feel panic, though his hands shook. He felt, recognized. It was a strange feeling, unlike anything he had ever known. He could sense that she knew him in a way no human could. It was as if she could see memories that weren't his, emotions that he hadn't experienced yet, connections that spanned beyond time. He froze, unsure whether to step closer or run. But before he could decide, she turned to the others standing behind her. She raised her head slightly, her movements calm and deliberate. Then she spoke, not with words he could understand, but with a clarity that made him feel the meaning instantly. "This is my husband." The words didn't sound human, but their meaning was undeniable. His stomach tightened. His mouth went dry. His mind spun. He felt something inside him break open and fold at the same time. He wanted to speak, to deny it, to laugh, to scream anything, but he could only stare. The other figures did not react with surprise or confusion. They didn't question her. They didn't seem to doubt her words. They simply stepped back slightly, acknowledging her statement as fact. And then she smiled. It wasn't a small smile. It wasn't a polite smile. It was full, warm knowing. It carried no threat, no judgment, no expectation. It was a smile that seemed to say, "I have been waiting for you." He felt it deep in his chest, a pull so strong it made his knees weak. It wasn't love in the human sense. Not at first. It was recognition, acceptance, something so profound that he couldn't name it. Something that went beyond logic, beyond reason, beyond anything he had ever believed possible. He wanted to ask her questions, so many questions. Who were they? Why him? How could this be real? But the words didn't come. His voice failed him. And yet, he somehow understood everything she was trying to communicate. She wasn't dangerous. She wasn't angry. She wasn't here to hurt him. She was. Waiting, watching, and now acknowledging him. Time seemed to stretch and bend around them. For a long moment, the world outside the clearing didn't exist. There were no cars, no streetlights, no distant sounds of life. Just him, just her, just the quiet presence of the others who stood behind her, silent, calm, observing. He realized that the calm he had felt before, the strange sense of being noticed, wasn't random. It wasn't fear or accident. It had been preparation. He had been readying himself without knowing it. And now, in this moment, everything clicked into place. She stepped closer, and he felt a warmth in the air, like the temperature had changed just slightly, like the space itself was alive. She didn't speak, but her eyes held meaning. He felt 1,000 thoughts and emotions pass through her gaze, all without words. There was trust there. There was patience. There was a connection that had existed long before he had been born and would exist long after. He wanted to run, to escape the intensity of it all, but his body wouldn't move. It felt as if some invisible tether held him in place, urging him to stay. And slowly, he realized that he didn't want to leave. He wanted to understand. She didn't reach for him. She didn't touch him. And yet, when he looked at her, it was as if an invisible hand had reached into his chest and rearranged something inside him. Pieces he hadn't known were missing clicked into place. He could see his life in a new way, see the path he had walked, see the choices he had made, and somehow understand why he had been chosen or noticed by her. The other beings behind her didn't move. They simply observed, silent witnesses to something that was unfolding in a way he couldn't explain. They were calm, respectful, and somehow protective. He didn't know how long they stood there. Seconds, minutes, hours, it didn't matter. When the moment finally ended, it was abrupt. The air shifted. The temperature returned to normal. The world of ordinary night pressed back in. And just like that, she and the others were gone. He was alone again, but he wasn't the same. Something inside him had changed. A quiet certainty had replaced the confusion and fear he had felt before. He knew what he had seen was real, and he knew that he had been acknowledged. And more than that, he knew he had been seen. Really seen. For days afterward, he kept thinking about her smile. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind. The calm, the recognition, the warmth, it all stayed with him. Even when he tried to return to normal life, the world felt different. People moved differently. The air felt heavier. Every small sound seemed sharper. Every shadow seemed to carry meaning. He didn't tell anyone. He didn't need to. There were no words that could convey what had happened. No sentences that could carry the weight of the recognition he had felt. All he could do was live with it, carry it with him, and try to make sense of it in his own way. And deep down, he knew this wasn't over Dot. It hadn't been random. It hadn't been an accident. She had noticed him for a reason. Something had shifted that night, something beyond his understanding, something beyond the human world. He didn't know what would happen next. Maybe he would see them again. Maybe he wouldn't. Maybe he was meant to live his life quietly, carrying the memory of that smile. Or maybe this was only the beginning of something far bigger than he could imagine. Either way, he understood one thing clearly. His life had changed forever. He had been seen, acknowledged, and chosen in a way he couldn't explain. And nothing, no routine, no logic, no ordinary day would ever feel completely the same again. And for the first time, he didn't feel afraid. He felt ready. After that night, everything changed. On the outside, life seemed normal. He still woke up, went to work, came home, and went to bed. The routines didn't look different to anyone else. But inside, everything had shifted. The air felt heavier sometimes, like it carried a quiet energy only he could sense. Sounds seemed sharper. Shadows seemed to hold meaning. Even familiar places felt different, as if they were waiting for him to notice something. He tried to ignore it at first. He told himself that life had to go on. Work demanded attention, bills had to be paid, and people expected normal behavior. Yet, no matter how hard he tried, the memory of her smile stayed with him. The way she had looked at him, the way she had recognized him, the warmth he had felt, it refused to fade. Sleep became strange. Sometimes he would wake up suddenly in the middle of the night, certain he was being observed. Other nights, he would dream vividly of skies and places he had never seen, with her standing beside him silently, watching over him. These dreams were calm, almost comforting, yet they left him restless in the morning. He didn't know whether to be afraid or grateful. During the day, he noticed subtle changes in himself. His thoughts were sharper. His intuition felt stronger, like he could sense things about people without explanation. He caught himself noticing patterns and details that would normally escape him. He didn't tell anyone, how could he? Even thinking about sharing it seemed impossible. People would laugh. They would call him crazy. And yet, the feeling persisted that he was no longer just living an ordinary human life. Something bigger had touched him, had left its mark. Days turned into weeks. At first, he hoped the encounters would happen again. He wanted to see her, to understand, to ask questions. But nothing came. There were no lights in the sky, no figures in the shadows, no sense of her presence, at least not in the obvious way. And slowly, he began to accept that maybe he would never see them again. But that acceptance didn't bring peace. Instead, it brought reflection. He began thinking about what had happened, not as a strange story, but as a moment that had altered his life forever. The encounter, the recognition, the smile, it wasn't random. Somehow, some way, he had been chosen to experience it. The thought was overwhelming. He didn't understand why or how, but the certainty that it had meaning was undeniable. He started noticing things in his daily life that he had never noticed before. People's gestures, their expressions, their unspoken emotions, they all seemed clearer. Even nature felt alive in a different way. The wind brushing against his face, the rustling of leaves, The faint glow of the evening sky, they seemed to carry messages he couldn't fully interpret. Everything around him had a deeper texture, a hidden layer he hadn't noticed before. Even simple moments were no longer simple. A stranger's smile felt heavier with meaning. A quiet glance in a shop seemed full of hidden intention. And when he looked at the night sky, he couldn't stop thinking about her, about them, about the calm, vast space where everything had felt connected. The memory of her words haunted him most. "This is my husband." It wasn't romantic in the way humans understand it. It was something older, something deeper, something that existed beyond time and human life. He realized that she hadn't claimed him in a way that would change who he was. She had recognized him, acknowledged him, seen him in a way no one else ever could. And that recognition carried a responsibility. Even if he didn't fully understand it yet, he began to feel a quiet shift in his purpose. The world hadn't changed, but he had. He no longer saw life as a series of routines or obligations. Each moment carried a weight, a significance he had never felt before. The ordinary had become extraordinary. Every choice, every glance, every action felt like it mattered more than before. Some nights, when he was alone, he would close his eyes and try to feel her presence again. He couldn't always sense it, but when he could, it was comforting, like a gentle reassurance that he wasn't alone, even if the world around him didn't know. It was a reminder that life was bigger than he could see, that the universe held mysteries that didn't need explanation to be real. He tried to share it once, in a very vague way, with someone he trusted, hoping for understanding. But the words stumbled and failed him. The experience was too personal, too strange, too beyond human comprehension to be explained with ordinary language. He realized that some truths were meant to be lived, not told, even without speaking about it. The experience changed the way he interacted with the world. He was kinder, more patient, more aware of the small things that most people ignored. He paid attention to the beauty in mundane moments. He listened more than he spoke. He looked deeper into people's eyes. And in quiet moments, he smiled, remembering the calm that had touched him that night. That life went on, but he had a secret now. Not one that could be exposed or proven. Not one that would bring him fame or recognition, but a secret that reminded him daily that there was more to existence than what human eyes could see, that the universe had layers, and that sometimes, if one was noticed, even for a fleeting moment, life could be touched by something truly extraordinary. Months passed. He didn't see her again. He didn't see the others. The world continued its rhythm of work, obligations, and simple routines. But inside him, the rhythm had changed. He carried the memory of her smile, the recognition, the feeling of being seen. It was a quiet force, shaping his thoughts, guiding his attention, reminding him that life had depth and wonder beyond what most people experienced. Sometimes, late at night, he would walk alone, hoping to feel the pull again. Sometimes he felt it, faintly, like a whisper across the wind, a brush of warmth in the air. Other times, there was nothing, just silence. But even the silence felt meaningful now, as if it was waiting for him to notice it. And in all of it, he understood something important. The encounter hadn't been about fear or control or power. It had been about connection, recognition, the reminder that life is bigger than routine, that the universe can touch a human life in ways that can't always be explained, that sometimes being truly seen is more profound than anything else. He didn't know if he would ever see her again. Maybe he would, maybe he wouldn't. But the impact of that night and the days after would stay with him forever. The world would continue. People would continue. But he would never be ordinary again. He had been seen, acknowledged, and touched in a way that changed the way he experienced life. He learned to carry it quietly, to let it guide him without demanding recognition from anyone else. And in that quiet acceptance, he found peace. Even years later, he would sometimes look at the night sky and without words remember her. The calm, the recognition, the smile. And in those moments, he felt it again, the pull, the connection, the sense that life was far bigger, far deeper, and far more mysterious than he had ever imagined. And that was enough. It was more than enough. Because some experiences don't need proof. Some truths don't need explanation. Some moments simply exist, and they change everything. And he carried that moment with him for the rest of his life.